Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the July edition of the DadX Discussions. My name is Matt Strain, and I'm here on behalf of the National At-Home Dad Network. This month, our guest that we're bringing in to chat with us is Adam Nafziger. Now, Adam's been an at-home dad for a while now. Originally from Colorado, he moved to Minnesota 20 years ago with his wife, Nikki, who was born and raised there. His oldest, June, was born back in October of '06, and he became a full-time dad all the way back in 2007. Adam's got three kids now, June, who's 17, Freya, who's 15, and Arnie, who's 9. Prior to becoming an at-home dad, he managed production for a couple of small candy companies. He is currently taking the prerequisites to enter a nursing program and is working towards getting his RN license in January of 2007. Like many of us, he's active in the PTA, volunteers regularly at his kids' schools, owns and manages 2 duplexes. That's something different. But more importantly, Adam has been through the college application process 3 times now, with the 4th one coming soon. His oldest started community college at 12 and is now moving on to the University of Minnesota. Adam himself went through the process about 18 months ago to begin working toward his RN license. And his middle child is looking towards college as we speak right now. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Adam on screen with us, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about this whole college application process. Now, good to see you, Adam. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there, everyone. Yeah, happy to be here.
So the last time I did anything involving college applications would have been around 1989. In the early part of my senior year of high school when I was applying. So to say that I'm a little out of the loop as to what it involves now is the grossest understatement on the planet. It's intimidating. I mean, it's scary. So give us a little bit of information about, what you went through. I mean, you said you started with your oldest when they went into community college at 12.
Yeah, we had, so my oldest, June, they are, kind of an unusual experiment in one sense. They were grade accelerated, and by the time they finished 8th grade at 12 years old, we didn't quite know what to do with them. They had kind of finished up and they were not ready for high school, both physically, maturity-wise. And we happened to know a family who had a kid who was 9 that started community college and now is 15 and finishing up his PhD this year, which is crazy. And we just happened to run into them in the Twin Cities, which is almost unheard of. Anyway, we worked with them and they told us about this program at a community college that they were able to get into. So we did the application process in a really weird way. So I kind of talk about that as like a one-off situation, just because that's not a typical process. There was no guidance counselor involved and anything like that. We did do the process, but more importantly, the next time we did it was when I did it, and June did it probably around the same time, looking here. And you're right, it is really different than it was. I first applied to college in '93, also as a senior in high school. And it was all on paper, and it was lots of hand typing essays and all of that stuff. So a lot of things are streamlined. You can apply on your phone, which is just, crazy. You can do pretty much the whole process. A lot of schools are using one application. There's a common app that a lot of school systems will use, where you can just apply once and then you might have to tweak it or add specific things to, for a specific school. And also depending on your thing of study. But I guess the way to start all this is, go ahead.
What is that? Is that like a named app, or are there several of them?
We didn't actually use it. I just know with my friends, like June's parents, like as we've talked through this process, there is something called the Common App, which I did not research because we did not have to do it. You'll quickly find out in this process that it can be a lot of work, and the number of times that you apply, increases the workload. It also can be expensive. If you're looking at every place has an application fee. Some schools are now waiving application fees as they're trying to, attract more people. Higher education is declining, not in the enrollment is declining. I think that a lot of us have read the headlines that a lot of schools are dealing with that. College has gotten really expensive, and a lot of people are finding that the jobs available to them when they come out are not worth the expense. And so right now, higher education numbers are in decline. And so schools are trying to adapt to that. And part of that is like by waiving different things that used to be just very standard, like application fees. For my own, I'm at the same community college that June went to, and it's just in the suburbs of Minneapolis. And I don't know if I even had to pay a fee for that, honestly. And I think if I would have, it was $25. And with that one, because of the way that Minnesota works, I can then go to any school in the Minnesota state system with that one application, and I can transfer credits and I can move. Like I took a class to become a certified nursing assistant because I just wanted to do that at a different school, and I didn't have to do anything. I could literally just enroll in that, even though it was a different college. And I'm guessing that a lot of states have something similar to that on the community college level, where there's a lot of cross application. But there's,
I'm assuming that most states have like a centralized website where you can look into the state community college program. I mean, I can't lie. Yeah. I mean, Google is my best friend because I'm old and slow.
Yep, me too. Yeah, there is, and I would, just as a really quick thing, if your kids really don't know what they want to do or where they want to go, I've been super impressed with community colleges. Back when I was a high school senior in 93 and 94, there was no way that I was going to look at one, just because it just seemed like a step down from what was elite, even though I didn't go to an elite school or anything like that. But it just seemed like they had a stigma to them. Now, having been a parent that has had a kid go through community college as a student myself, I'm super impressed by community colleges. What you don't necessarily get at a community college is the life experience. And I think that we really shouldn't underestimate how important that growing experience can be for a lot of kids to move out of the house, live with strangers, learn how to like executive function their own life, especially if you have a kid like mine. All three of my kids have ADHD, and executive functioning is, I know, I think Matt does too. And I'm the only one in my house that does not have ADHD. So I live with an entire household full of people. But I think there's a lot of learning that can come from that college situation that's not anything to do with academia and no academics involved. But at the same time, it's expensive. And if you're just like paying tuition for your kid to figure out what they want to do, you might want to consider looking at a community college program where they can take classes for relatively affordably. And the teachers at community colleges are there to teach. Most of them are not doing research. I have a lot of friends who are employees of higher education. And I know that my close friends that work directly at community colleges enjoy their job because they're there to teach. They're not doing research. They're not writing papers. They're teachers. So that's a little side fact.
And I'll point out, as much as you talk about the overall like growth experience of going away to college and living on your own and all that type of thing, I can look back at my own college experience and I can honestly say I would have had a very different and probably less troublesome life had I taken the time and done some community college before leaving to go away to college at 18 years old. Because when I was 18 years old, I had no business living by myself. Now, everybody out there, your kids obviously better than we do. But I could easily see where, I could have gone to a community college to knock out my prerequisites and gotten a better handle on who I was as a person, gotten a little bit better handle on prioritizing, studying, and doing the work and that type of thing before jumping into that college lifestyle of, hey, nobody's here to tell me no, it's time to buy a motorcycle and go hang out with my friends every night, which is what I did.
Yeah, and you really do. It really comes down to your own kid. I mean, I've been in an unusual situation this summer where we have a cabin in northern Minnesota, and we're here. And my 17-year-old is living at home by themselves this summer, working a job. which has been a very big learning experience. My wife and I have gone back and forth, and they're getting a C minus as far as like taking care of things and being responsible, but it's a relatively low stakes, as we go. And June's going to be going to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus, which will be less than 10 minutes away from us. June is a real homebody, and they would never want to go really far away. I'll also throw it out there that June is trans. And so that was part of our college application process, was looking for a place that we felt safe. I went to school in northern Indiana, and I loved it. It was a rural, small college. There's no way in hell that I'd send my trans kid to northern Indiana right now. I don't need to get into the politics, but choosing colleges and going through that process, it's one of those things that I never would have considered years ago when I first had kids, even 5 years ago, even when June came out. It really wasn't on my radar about like that sort of stuff playing into the process of, as you start to look and apply to colleges, like where are you comfortable sending your kid?
Yeah. That, again, not something that would have occurred to me. I'm a long way from this moment. My oldest just turned 10 in January. Of course, she is 10 going on 30. But the fact is, these are things that we all have to think about when it comes to colleges. I grew up in the New Orleans area, and I had a really weird cultural experience when I went away to college, because I went from the New Orleans area, which is a relatively open-minded place, and then I went to college in South Central Mississippi, in Hattiesburg at the University of Southern Mississippi. Now, granted, we had a community within that college of more open-minded, for lack of a better term, kind of hippy-dippy kids. But we were by far a very small minority in that community. And I can easily see where, you need to think about where your child is going to be comfortable, and more importantly, where your child's going to be safe.
Yeah. And, I would say that probably, with few exceptions, most colleges are going to be mostly safe and open places, no matter where they're located. Certainly, schools are, but once you leave that bubble, it can be, and it's, as a kid who presents as a white woman, June is luckier than some, but at the same time, the reality is they're clearly transgendered. And that is, something that we thought about. With my daughter, that's less of an issue because she's not that way, but she's also more academically driven. And so we've been looking at colleges with her now she's going to be a junior this year, which is the year that she kind of gets serious about this. But we started looking at this back in 8th grade. If I could put my two kids together there, where one is like super focused and the other one doesn't give a crap about things like that, and put them together, I think I'd get one or two really normal kids that kind of were not totally anxiety ridden about things, and also kind of put a little bit of effort in. So anyway, but with her, it's a totally different process because she wants to go away. She wants to travel. She's looking at going to Europe or Canada, and she wants to fly. And so she also academically is, even though June did amazing, weird things like that, she's by far a better student, and the world is becoming her oyster. And so, with her, it's a different process, because with June, we knew that as we were doing the application process, we were going to be paying. I think it's, we got some scholarships and stuff like that. With Freya, I think it's pretty reasonable that she will be able to go to probably some school for pretty much nothing, just based on academics. But, that starts changing your process too about where you want to look. And, it's all a thing. And I don't know who all, is here and went through this year, but this year in particular was really tricky because of the FAFSA debacle that's still ongoing for the financial aid. When I went the first time,
okay, I was going to say, you lost me with
FAFSA. I think that's the federal academic. It's the financial aid form that all families fill out.
Right. I remember filling. That was like the book that you had to fill out back in the 90s.
It is no longer that way. So in one sense, this is a classic U.S. government thing. They made the form super simple, and then they completely botched the rollout. So as of now, we just got June's financial aid offer 3 weeks ago. Normally that stuff comes in like March, and we filled it out as needed to. The good news with the form is that you no longer have to have as many records as you did. It used to be a real big pain, especially if you're someone who doesn't necessarily keep all your tax records from the last 10 years and don't keep all of that stuff. I mean, I happen to be that person, so that wasn't that much of an issue. But even for me, because they now pull data from the IRS, you only have to answer a handful of questions to verify your identity, go through that process, and then they can pull your own financial records from what you've already filed with the government, which
Oh,
is great.
that
It's
is
really,
hugely
really
helpful.
nice. But they never got it going. And so schools are still dealing with this. In my own college thing, my community college just got my form the middle of June, and the one that I sent in like December 15th. They just got it. So I don't even have my own like aid offers or anything like that yet for my own schooling, but I'm only going part-time and it's cheap. So it's kind of a non-issue for me. So I'm hoping that by the time Freya is doing this in 2 years, where we're really looking at what she's going to be doing in the fall of 26, that's kind of taken care of, and like it'll be kind of back to normal. This 1 year was a really big debacle with the rollout of that. But it is a process that you have to do, and you have to be aware of all the stuff that you have to do. And I would say that the biggest challenge overall for the whole application process is working with your kids and being really kind of detail oriented. And for some people that comes really easily. For some people it doesn't. And if you're a person who struggles with some details, start early and just start. If you even just do like a Google sheet and just like kind of like put down information and like try to start thinking about keeping things like academic records and making notes of stuff. Like if your kid is in a sport or in an activity, it's sometimes useful to catalog if they win an award. I mean, you may not need it, but when you're in the application process, to be able to have someplace where you're like doing that process with your kid, like, well, what else have you done? And they're like, I didn't do anything. And you're like, well, you did. Like, do you remember your sophomore year where you got like like the most outstanding speech and debate person was like, as a freshman? Like, that's something that is, good to remember, but years out, you might not actually remember it. And if you don't physically go look for the reward, you may completely forget that you had something that's really useful for you.
That does make sense. Now again, I was going to ask. Back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
I remember filling out the applications, and once you got past all of the basic name, demographics, address, and that type of thing, there were questions that they asked. I mean, they asked about your academic records, they asked about your extracurricular activities.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I dreaded more than anything else in the world was that danged essay,
Yeah.
uh, because I've never been good at writing.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like I'm pretty good at verbally expressing myself, but getting that from my brain onto a piece of paper never seemed to work.
Yeah, and I would say that in our experience, I think with the level of schools, like as a state university, there was definitely an essay as part of that. And June really struggles with writing to super smart in a lot of ways, but really struggles putting pen to paper. Not literally, well, actually, literally, their handwriting is terrible. But
Yeah.
writing that whole process, I feel like since we've been doing this, a lot of colleges are moving towards a real holistic kind of view of the student, and they're putting a lot less individual weight on like the essay or even standardized test scores. Some schools are actually not looking at them at all. And so as you're going into the high school process, you don't have to make a lot of decisions, but think about like what kind of a school you might be looking at. I mean, if you're looking at a state school that you're going to be happy with and you can afford and you're going to get a good education, like I would say like University of Minnesota for June is going to be like a perfect fit. That meant that we didn't have to stress out about the quality of the application or like, dozens of volunteer hours of extracurriculars or stuff like that. If you're looking at like Freya's looking at some like step down Ivy League schools, like that's something that's on our radar that like, okay, like volunteer hours will actually be a part of that holistic thing. We need to kind of look at that proactively and keep track of some of that stuff because she's going to be looking at schools where that matters. And she may not actually wind up doing that, but it's hard to catch up if you are coming into the game at the beginning of junior year or middle of junior year when you really get serious about looking at schools and touring them and finding out that all along it would have been helpful for you to at least be writing stuff down. I mean, you can't go back and padding your resume or whatever doesn't make any sense. But but be cognizant of kind of like what your steps are or what they could theoretically be, just so you kind of are prepared for that.
Now, one of the questions that I have in particular about college, or is certainly about the whole college process in this day and age. I'm not gonna candy coat it. I wasted a lot of time and money going to school. I graduated high school. I went away to college, not necessarily because it was something that I needed to do. I went away to college because it was what I was supposed to do.
Yep.
I went to college majoring in music and theater, or as my loving father put it, hunger and starvation. And I spent about 2 years in undergrad before dropping out of college because I realized that I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yep.
I was going to school, working part-time. Eventually, I was working part-time in restaurants, and I moved into a career as a chef, working my way up through the ranks, eventually going to culinary school. But one of the things that I often wonder about is, how do you talk to your kids about whether or not the college path is what they need to follow for what they want in life? I mean, like my wife is a medical doctor and wanted to go into medicine. So obviously, if you're going to go into medicine, education is a requirement. I look back and think, if instead of going to the University of Southern Mississippi for 2 years at 18, if I had taken a year off of school, gone out and worked in restaurants, figured out that's what I wanted to do, and instead gone through a culinary school program, how much of a difference would that have made in my life and career if I had just started off on that path instead of that just being something I was kind of doing to pay the bills while I figured things out?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I would think that those conversations with your kids are probably, in one sense, going to be easier than they were when you and I were doing that. At least with my own teenagers, a lot of them are very cognizant of the world that they're coming into, where on one hand, I'm a huge fan of education for education's sake. I think that as a country, we would do a lot better if everyone could go to school for free and pursue their loves, and we're just better educated overall in anything. And my own degree is in English literature. So, I'm also in that sense that I went into school not knowing what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a music major, and I realized right away that I didn't. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I spent 4 years kind of not really knowing what I wanted to do, and kind of went into newspaper. But when I got out of college in '98, newspapers were already kind of dealing with the death knell of the internet. And I started working for my dad. I grew up in the candy industry, and I think my dad realized that either he could give me a job or pay for me to have an apartment. And so he chose to hire me. And so that's how I got into what I did. Never intending to, but knowing now what I know, what I wish I would have known then, I would have probably studied something a little bit more viable, in the sense of like with that, with my own kid, with June, when June started at Normandale Community College at 12, their first love was theater. And that was, as a 12-year-old kid, we're like, oh, that's fun. Like they really like technical theater background stuff. And we're just doing theater stuff. And that was actually their entry into the school. There was a theater teacher there who said, like, yeah, I'll have this 12-year-old kid in my class. Like, let's do that. And then the pandemic happened and everything with theater shut down. So June wound up getting a degree in computer science, which is fine, which is great. And then another second degree in just like a basic liberal arts. So when we were looking at four-year schools here for the next step, we were assuming it was going to be something in the STEM field because that's what they seem to really like. And instead they came back and said they're going to do theater. And we're like, okay. So you have that parental, are you sure that you want to go into something is like, but they really do. And they also want to do theater education. And I'm like, okay, well then there's the thing there. It's like both technical theater with an education component. I'm like, okay, well, at least there is, in theory, at this point, as a 17-year-old kid starting, like in the back of their head, like, okay, I have to support myself. And, even though teaching is what it is, at least it's a job. And it's certainly better
Well,
than,
I,
volunteering to run a nonprofit community theater and like, working at Subway while you try to
I
figure
can
out
honestly
your
say,
life.
again, back in the day, I was a double major of music and theater. And of the people that I went to college with, that I keep in contact with from those departments, my friend Jay, who was a music major, Jay is now a high school band director, um, living a great life, has been doing it a while, really enjoys what he does. Juniper was one of the theater majors who still works in the field. And
Mhm.
Juniper is also a high school theater teacher who is also doing some outside semi-professional work, directing and that type of thing.
Yeah, there's
But
no such thing as a
again,
full-time theater teacher anymore.
yeah, I mean, they both also moved into that teaching background,
Yeah.
which honestly, again, was better than Jay's original thought as a music major, because he figured as if he couldn't make it in music performance. We were in college right around the time that Billy Ray Cyrus had just come out with the "Achy Breaky Heart" song,
Uh-huh.
and Jay's drunken claim was that if worse came to worse, no matter what happened, he could always write country songs because obviously that was easy enough to do based on
Apparently.
that
Sure.
song.
Yeah.
Now, granted, obviously, in hindsight, nope, there's a bit more to it than that. But
Sure. But, when you're a
it is
20-year-old kid,
encouraging to know that
yeah.
they're looking at that education background. I was not that
Mhm.
smart.
No, neither
I
was
was
I.
100% performance and performance. That
Yep.
that was where I was going to be. That was what I was going to do, and I had zero backup plans, zero
Yep.
parachutes, and
Yep.
it was tough. Now we had brought up financial aid earlier,
Mhm.
and you were talking about the federal financial aid plan. Now I remember again. I went through this once in like 1990 when I was applying to undergrad work, and again in the late 90s when I went to culinary school. I applied once again for financial aid, and there were some
Mhm.
loans, and there were Pell Grants. I'm assuming things like Pell Grants and that type of thing still exist, or is
As
it
far as I
all
Yep.
loans now?
No, there are still Pell Grants, and we don't qualify for them, but they are out there for sure. And depending, often when you're looking at schools, the sticker shock is going to be really, really big. But I think it's kind of important to note that a lot of small private liberal arts schools actually can be more affordable than state schools, especially ones that have decent endowments. Minneapolis St. Paul has about 6 or 7 within 100 miles, really well-known small private liberal arts schools that have stickers of like $84,000 a year, which is just crazy. But no one pays that. That's the thing. Like, so you're going to get into this thing where you're going to see these numbers and your eyes are going to pop out of your head. But it's worth looking at some of those schools. My neighbor right across the street is the financial aid director for St. Olaf College, which is in Northfield, Minnesota. It's a small private liberal arts school, and their sticker price is like $68,000 a year this year. But he said that the average student pays about 15 to 18 for a year because they are so well endowed with finances that they can offer some really big packages that like the University of Minnesota cannot. I mean, they have scholarships and stuff like that, but they have a lot more flexibility. So I would say, as you're going through the process, don't close your door to some of those things just based on sticker price alone. It's really worth looking at. If it's a school that you're serious about, kind of find out. The internet is really useful because people will post what they actually pay. You can go to forums and stuff like that, and a lot of times those little schools, even though they have really high prices, don't actually. Your final cost is not not nearly as much. And in fact, I think that if we were looking at a small private school for June, we might be paying less than we are going to be at the state school, depending on what school they would have chosen.
Yeah, now
So,
that's fascinating to me. I would not have thought that at
no.
all.
And
I mean,
and then there's some schools that just don't at all. Like for example, McAllister College is in St. Paul, and that is where Kofi Annan went. It's got a big international following, and they don't actually do really kind of like any financial aid except for grants. And so like you pretty much pay like $70,000 a year, which obviously is a very select group of people that can even if they wanted to borrow that much money, which they shouldn't, because you come out of school with almost $300,000 home.
I can't imagine.
Neither can I.
I mean, I won't lie. I did my undergraduate work between like 1990 and 1992, and borrowed money to do that. And then I borrowed money again to go through culinary school in the early 2000s. It only took me around, trying to think, I finished culinary school in 2002, and I finally paid off my last student loan in the last like 12 months.
Yep.
And I won't lie, I literally got an email that said, you have completed paying off your student loan. And my thought was, that must just be like one of them. And then I looked and realized, oh no, I've actually paid them all off, which to me was just shocking. Now, Tony asked a question of regarding, most state technology and two-year colleges offer students the opportunity to obtain 2 years of required credits for a more reasonable price. Now, this is going back to what we were talking about earlier with the community colleges and that type of thing.
Absolutely. And, not only that, I mean, Tony's absolutely right. A lot of, depending on what you want to do, some of those programs are paid for. Like I became a CNA last year because I wanted the education experience. But if I wanted to actually be a CNA, the state of Minnesota would pay for the entire program and the testing and the licensure, at least reimburse me if I go work in a senior living center. So when I took that class, I'm 48, and I was not the youngest person I was not the oldest person in that class. There were 4 Somali women in there who were working as CNAs who were taking this class. They were in their 50s, and with the license, they could earn more money, and the state was paying for it. That's a really affordable way. The other thing that I would also say in regards to Tony, and I know this is maybe a Minnesota thing, but we offer a program in the state called PSEO, Post-Secondary Education Opportunity. And like for the last 2 years of high school, a lot of high school kids, if they have decent grades and are motivated, can take classes on a university campus for free, completely. Like the state pays 100% tuition and books as well. And so like so June was in high school. So June went to community college, graduated, and then went to high school for a year and a half. But in high school, didn't actually even really go to high school, was only there for the theater program because they did then PSEO and took more classes that we didn't have to pay for at all. And we have friends whose kids did their last 2 years of high school, almost not even in the building. And they, at least in Minnesota, you can even do private schools. You can set and the state will pay the tuition. It can't be underwater basket weaving. It does have to be a high school because it's dual enrollment. It has to also work with covering the requirements for a basic high school education.
Right.
But that is something to look into. My daughter Freya is not looking at PSEO. She's doing a different program, and she's getting really serious about AP tests. And so she's taken 7 AP tests so far in her first 2 years. And she's going to be, since she's going the AP route, and she's not doing PSEO because she's looking at going to a school out of state. And in Minnesota, PSEO is really transferable, but not like if she wants to go to, like right now, her number one choice is MIT. MIT does not offer credit for if she takes English literature at Normandale, or whatever as a college, a dual enrollment. They won't offer her credit, but they will take the AP credit.
Well, of course.
But schools also limit how much they, some AP classes. She's finding as she's going through this process, they'll give like credit hours up to a certain amount, but you can choose what it is. So she's taken, like history and calculus and biology and some of that. But once she gets to the process, whatever college she chooses, she can pick and choose which of her AP credits she wants to apply to her her credits like that. So that's another program affordable credits. And to speak to what Tony asked, yes, that's a huge thing. Like some of those credits are super affordable, and some of them are for free, especially if you're wanting to do some technology stuff. Like I know a lot of technical schools right now, there's such a need for people in the trades, and they are hungry. And so even if the state or the school doesn't pay for it, unions do, or other groups do. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. We have, I have our neighbor's going into HVAC repair, and he's a kid that barely graduated from high school. I was worried he was going to drop out. Super awesome kid, super smart, but not very motivated. And he graduated, and he's going into an HVAC program, and he's paying nothing. He's going to get a 2-year degree, and it's being paid for by the union, the trade union that does. And as long as he finishes it, then they'll pay for the whole program, and he gets a job afterwards.
That's amazing.
It's
Now,
amazing, you know.
One of the things that you just said that caught my attention is you were talking about how Freya's first choice for a school is MIT.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the key word there was you said first choice. How deep is that choice selection going for your family? Is there a list of like 3, 5, 20? I mean,
that's a good question. You know, with her, we're just getting to the point where she's got a list that she's looking at of about 6 right now, and she's not seriously pursued any of them because she's just starting her junior year. We looked at, you know, when we've done traveling, we've looked at schools. So I'm originally from Colorado, as you said in the introduction. So we've gone to visit my parents. Colorado School of Mines is another school that she's looking at. Both kids were thinking about that. So we did a tour there when they were, like not even at the process of looking at that. And that's still on the list for her. But how deep are we going into it? Not super deep. Like she's still a generalist right now. She doesn't know. She wants to do something in STEM. She's thinking mathematics or engineering. So she's looking at schools like that, but we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're like really starting to focus in on that. Yeah. At this point, I would say if you would talk to me a year from now, I bet we'll have a much better idea of where we're focusing energy.
I know, again, hindsight's 2020. I don't think, I mean, not only did I not necessarily go to college for the right reasons, you know, again, I went because it was what I was supposed to do. You know, I graduated high school back in the day. Like the plan was you either joined the military or you went to college. There was like those were the 2 options that we were offered.
Yep.
I went away to college, but I didn't take the whole application process or any of that very seriously. I mean, I remember in the beginning looking at several schools and having some real pie in the sky ideas about how, you know, wouldn't it be great to go to Juilliard or wouldn't it be great to go here? But none of those were really that realistic. And in the end, I ended up selecting a college that just offered me a really, really great financial aid package.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's where I ended up. Like when my kids reached that college age, I would think looking at applying to at least like 3 to 4 different places that you could move forward with what your intentions are would be ideal. That way you have choices based on where you get accepted and what kind of financial aid packages you get, as opposed to focusing on just this is where I want to go. And then maybe things don't work out with that and you're left in a lurch.
Yeah. And I think that's it's a really good point. You know, in my process of my experience right now, June only applied to the University of Minnesota. We were pretty sure that they would get into there. The only other school we looked at 2 other schools. We looked at University of Michigan, and we did a trip out to Ann Arbor, which I loved, but I was also glad that they were not totally in love with, in the sense that it would have been a financial burden for one of us, both of us probably. They'd probably have to take out loans, and we'd probably have to pay more money than we wanted to spend. And then we just looked at a couple private schools and just to get a sense of what a small campus looked like. But there was only really one choice. With Freya, I am definitely going to have to be proactive in winnowing that down. I mean, we have, with having a group of friends that June has that just went through this whole process, we've got, they've got some friends that applied to like 20 to 25 different schools, which is
Good
nuts.
God.
I know. And it's like, that's not cheap and it takes a lot of time. And I just can't imagine thinking seriously enough about that I would take the time or have my kid take the time to do all that work. Because you have to come to the point where, so I think like, as you're saying, like 4 or 5, maybe 6 seems like a reasonable thing. But visits, if you can swing visits, are really, I think, are a really big thing. And even if it's for a school that you don't even think would be on the list, like we did a college thing, the University of Chicago came to the Twin Cities to do a presentation at one of the libraries. And we went. University of Chicago is not really on Freya's list, but if there are opportunities like that come, like it's good to take those just to get the sense of what that's like. I mean, there are some kids who can go and just like the first time they go to campus is like when they go to school. And I know a couple of kids who have done that, didn't even visit. I can't do that personally. I need to have too much control. I just can't imagine. That would stress me out. But
I pretty much did that back in the 90s. I had been to USM's campus one day, but I went there specifically to audition for scholarships in both the music and theater department because, again, it's performance-based, not academic-based. So unless they hear you sing, they can't determine whether or not you're worthy of getting a singing scholarship or an acting scholarship, which is what I was doing at the time.
Yeah, but and I did an audition too when I was thinking I was going to be a music major at Goshen College, and did that as part of a visiting weekend that they scheduled auditions at the same time. So we traveled to Indiana, and I did the audition and came home.
Now, when you talk about doing these campus visits, is that something that you coordinate through like their office of admissions, or did you just like show up in town and wander around campus, or what?
Both. So I've done both. So when we did the visit to Ann Arbor, we absolutely did, or like a welcome open house weekend. It's all part of like they have weekends. You sign up for them. They have a whole thing. And in a school like Michigan, which is not a typical school, I mean, it's got 65,000. It's huge. They run that like a machine, and they've got groups of kids that just come in and they set them out into groups. It's a whole process. So we've done that. We did the University of Minnesota visit that way. But like when we went to the School of Mines, we were just out visiting my parents in June of one year. And we just like, let's go to campus for a day. And we got out of the car, we walked around, got a sense, most buildings and most colleges are open during the day, and as long as you're not, don't look suspicious. You can like walk into they're all public buildings for the most part. So you can just walk in, look around. Sometimes you find somebody to talk to. You never know if you're doing it in the summer. If you do it in the fall or the winter, there's going to be people around, so which is also fine. So we've done both, and just like kind of making so we've done both as far as that goes. There's a lot to be said. If you're really serious about a place, definitely schedule like a planned visit when they're doing the show and tell, because keeping in mind that it's like buying a car, they're going to they're going to show you all the bells and whistles and the best things and stuff like that. But at the same time, you do really get a sense. And they have a lot of, especially depending on school, they have breakout sessions for what you're thinking you want to study. So like June was looking at theater. So we went specifically with like, we signed up ahead of time and had a very specific tour that the kids that were looking at economics never went to parts of the campus we did.
Right.
And did all that kind of stuff. We got to go to an opera and stuff like that. So,
yeah. Oh, cool. Now, one thing that I will point out, and this is just something that I experienced, oddly enough, not having anything to do with college, but working in the restaurant industry. And I don't know if other states do this, but I live in North Carolina. And for a while there, North Carolina was running a program where the state would pay off your student loans if you took a teaching position in a public school. Usually the public school teaching positions were in schools that were in desperate need of teachers. Mm-hmm. A lot of these schools were in inner cities that were in more impoverished communities. These were teaching jobs that were not going to pay what, teaching at the school in the nice upscale neighborhood would, or at the private school.
Yeah.
And I used to work in a restaurant, and we had a guy that came into work every afternoon that was doing that and teaching in order to pay back those student loans. And he did not think this through. There's no nice way of putting this. He was one of the most miserable human beings that I have ever met in my life. He hated teaching. He hated everything about it. But in his mind, it was almost like he had joined the military, like he couldn't quit.
Yeah.
Because if he quit his job, suddenly he was on the hook for all of his student loans.
Yep.
So basically, I want to say it was 7 years that he had to stick with it for them to forgive all of his student loans. And honestly, my daughter had been born and I had left the industry long before that 7-year period. So I have no idea if he stuck it out. But all I can say is I know I'm going to have the conversation with my kids that when it comes to some of these student loan forgiveness and student loan repayment plans that are being offered by different states, that you really need to think it through. That, on the one hand, the idea of, oh, hey, I could teach in a public school for 7 years. I mean, I get summers off. I only have to work from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Go talk to an actual school teacher before you jump on that bandwagon, because they'll tell you that there's a lot more work than that.
Yeah, my sister did that actually. She's but she did it for law school, so she's now a judge. But after she graduated from law school, she was a public defender for 10 years, and being a public defender paid off all of her law school loans, which was a significant amount of money. And I would say in year 7 and 8, it was a slog because there's not a lot of glamour in public defense.
No.
And so that's what she did. And for her, it was totally worth it. And so but as soon as her 10 years were done and she was paid off, then she started looking for the next thing. And that's when she threw her name into the ring to become a state judge. And so that's what she does now. But she had a process but that was kind of part of, as you're saying, talk with your kids about that. That was part of her plan when she was going to law school. She took out a bunch of loans and knew that, she had to really think about that if that's something that she wanted to do with doing public defense.
Yeah. So again, I can totally see that. Now, once again, we got regarding the cost of a college education. Oh, nope. What? Sorry, that was the same one. Click the wrong button. I would caution and recommend, if a person goes the loan forgiveness route, that they get it in writing and realize exactly what the commitment is. In the past, many states didn't forgive loans. It's a good point, is make sure that the state is forgiving loans as well as the federal loans, because I'm assuming there are loans that come both at the state and federal level.
Well, and private too. So with my sister Lara, only her federal loans were forgiven. I mean, that was the bulk of her loans, but she had private loans for sure that she still, it didn't matter what she would have done. She's still responsible. Heck, it's student loans. She could even die and they'd still, have to be paid back. They'd never get forgiven. So Tony's absolutely right. Make sure that you really know what's going on. And that, if you talk about record keeping, that's a really important one, because a lot of stuff gets lost, especially when you're a young adult and you're moving around, and if you're working, even if it's another qualified employer, that if you don't, you sometimes have to really go and fight for that to make sure that actually happens. We have a friend who's a teacher. She did the exact same thing. She wanted to be a teacher, but she did that very specifically so that she could get her loans. And she had to fight for a year and a half to get what she was promised. And she had everything in writing, which saved her money. So, and
he said, even though they were legally obligated to do so, like so many other things in the world, there's a lot of places where people make certain promises and commitments, and then when the time comes to pay them out, very often you will see somebody back away from that.
Sure.
and do everything they can to get out of having to live up to their end of things.
Well, also intentionally made difficult because there's working with the assumption that some people are not going to be able to do it. And so I don't know how many people are here in the upper Midwest, but we have a hardware store called Menards, which is Wisconsin based, and they don't do sales, they do rebates. And in order to get your 11% off, you literally have to fill out a piece of paper, physically mailed in, and then they send in a gift card with the receipt. You have to send the receipts in. They absolutely know that there's going to be a large percentage of people who are just not going to take the time to do that. And so it's purposely made obtuse and annoying. And that's what they bank on. And so there's definitely some of that in the loan forgiveness industry too, that if they, get it enough, there's just going to be people who are just like, you know what, it's not worth my time and money to like fight for this because I'm just tired of it. And they count on that. So
no, I can totally see that. Well, look, Adam, I want to thank you for your time. We're coming up on 150 right now. So honestly, it's about as much time as most parents have before we have to like jump back into the trenches.
I got 2 phone calls from the pediatrician's office while I was here.
I'm just getting ready to go pick the kids up from camp. Before we go, I do want to mention a couple of things for everybody to know. The National At-Home Dad Network is a 100% volunteer organization. Everything we do is staffed by volunteers and run by volunteers. Dale Van Vlera is our volunteer coordinator. If you have an interest in being a part of the National At-Home Dad Network and helping us out with our mission, there's several ways that you can do it. Reach out to Dale. I've got his email address right up there on the screen. He coordinates our volunteers, helping match people's skills with some of the things we need. More important, memberships are what enable us to keep the lights on. You can support our mission by becoming a member today. Go to athomedad.org. You can click on membership. You can become a yearly member. You can become an annually supporting member where your gift is just renewed every year. We offer a lifetime membership where it's a one-time donation of $500 and you're a member of the organization for life. Membership comes with a lot of benefits, everything from having access to the members area of our website, which includes everything from access to board meeting minutes all the way up to and including not only the ability to buy a ticket to come to Home Dad Con, but in the members area of our website, we've got recordings from past Home Dad Cons, whether it's keynote presentations or breakouts. There is something on that website to answer some question that every parent has out there. I've seen everything from cooking a date night meal with your spouse to, dealing with anger to, techniques for discipline with your kids. There's a little bit of everything out there for everybody. I highly recommend that you check it out. I thank you guys for all coming to the DadX discussion. We do this once a month. Feel free to also check out Home Dad Chat, which is our podcast. They do weekly episodes. You can listen to them on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We are recently working with a group of several other fatherhood organizations with a program called No Dad Alone. Some of those groups include Father's Eve. It includes the City Dads Network. It includes Fathering Together. These are all wonderful organizations that do wonderful work and that we're all in this fatherhood game together. We're all looking to help each other out. So please look into those organizations as well. Again, we're talking about City Dads, Fathering Together, as well as the Father's Eve organization and the National At-Home Dad Network. Hopefully, if any of you get the chance, you can join us at Home Dad Con this year for 2024. It's going to be happening October 17th through the 19th. St. Louis, Missouri. We're going to be at the Drury Hotel right at the foot of the arch. And on top of that, we're going to be doing for the second year in a row, our annual Dad's Run 5K. This year, we are actually raising money specifically for the Fathers Overcoming Adversity Fund, which is a fund that we put together where families where there's been a sudden injury or disaster in the family that leaves them in need can look out to the organization, look out to the National At Home Dad Network, and we have the ability to offer small grants to help them out in any way that they may need help. In this past year, we've given out $250 to a family that was a victim of a home fire. Originally, this was all started when we gave out a $500 gift to a family where the father suffered a traumatic brain injury. And as a stay-at-home dad, this put a lot of burden on them because he wasn't there. So, childcare costs came into effect, and we set up this fund so that we can actually make a difference in some of those dads' lives. So if you reach out to HomeDadCon or athomedad.org, you can click on the Dads Run This House link and find out how you can participate either in person or even virtually run. We've got a finisher's medal. As of today, they revealed the T-shirt, which is an optional purchase that you can make. Again, with all the funds going directly into that Fathers Overcoming Adversity Fund. I thank you guys all for your time. I appreciate you joining us. And again, we'll see you guys next month for the next DadX discussion. Bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.